Hello again. Thank you. The last time I preached here, which was a couple weeks ago, I said that the best ethical system would be one of 6 secular ethical systems. Now, if by the end of this sermon you disagree with me, that's fine. At least we will have reviewed some of these ethical systems, and you can continue studying them later on and figure out what works best for you. I'm just going to give you my opinion today. Well, the best ethical system is either going to be state consequentialism, utilitarianism, ethical egoism, ethical altruism, Kantian ethics, or natural ethics. And I said that we'd be able to choose the best one by remembering that the best ethical system is the one that contains and promotes the 5 ethical truths. I said that these ethical truths were going to be like lights on a runway that guide a plane to its destination. If we keep these truths in mind, whatever ethical system best contains and promotes them will be the best ethical system. What are these 5 truths? 1, simply speaking, all sentient creatures want to maximize their happiness. Therefore, they want to maximize their pleasure and minimize their suffering. I learned that one from the Dalai Lama, in case you're wondering. 2, all humans should be treated as if they have equal worth. 3, we should always obey the golden rule. 4, it is better to have good results than to just follow good rules. 5, each individual should be more concerned about what helps his or her species than what helps other species. And if you want to know some of my thinking about this, just give me your email address, write it neatly, and I'll send you the original sermon. Well, let's talk about state consequentialism. That's the first one on our list. And state consequentialism asserts that whatever benefits one's nation is good, and whatever does not is evil. It is not the best ethical system because it does not necessarily try to contain or promote any of the 5 ethical truths. When I think about state consequentialism, I think about Nazi Germany, what Nazi Germany was trying to achieve back in the 30s and 40s. Its goal was, at the very least, to conquer much of Europe and enslave the subjects therein and have the Germans be the number 1 people. Well, if they had won the war, probably everyone in the German Empire will be working hard to do whatever is best for the state, even if it went against their best interests, and even if it meant them doing horrible things. And I think just from that example, it's easy to understand why state consequentialism is not the best ethical system. Ethical system should be for helping people, not for enslaving or killing them. That brings us to utilitarianism. Utilitarianism asserts that whatever makes the most creatures, especially humans, the happiest is good, and whatever does not is evil. To live according to this ethical system, one needs to obey what I call the utilitarian rule. Always try to make every voluntary action you do achieve the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest amount of creatures, especially humans. Good news! Utilitarianism is the best ethical system, at least in my opinion. So there you go. There, end of sermon. I can go, right? Yeah, all right. Now you might be wondering, well, if that's true, Jason, why isn't everybody utilitarian? Because utilitarianism has been around, at least in one form or another, for at least 2,500 years, beginning with Epicurus. Of course, getting most famous in the 19th century with Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Well, probably the main reason is that there are at least 2 problems with utilitarianism, and I'm going to address those. The first problem is that utilitarianism can be confusing. Utilitarianism tells us to aim for the best result for all our voluntary actions, but we mortal humans do not always know what the result of our actions will be. Sometimes they're better than we hope for. Isn't that great when that happens? What a pleasant surprise. But unfortunately, sometimes they're worse than we hope for, and sometimes when we try to do good, we can do evil somehow. To this I reply that ethics is a complicated subject. Ethics is not easy. You have to spend a lot of time studying it to get a good handle on it, and even then, you won't know everything about it. It's a lifelong pursuit. Therefore, the best ethical system should be a little bit complicated too. To paraphrase Neil deGrasse Tyson, the universe is under no obligation to be understandable to us, and ethics is under no obligation to be easy for us. It's a lifelong challenge to be as ethical as we can be. I like to say that utilitarianism is the worst ethical system, except for all the rest. I'll say that again. Utilitarianism is the worst ethical system, except for all the rest. And I want you to think about a night sky now. There are no clouds in the night sky, and there's a big, beautiful full moon. And pointing to that moon is a human finger. Now, I'm going to say that, metaphorically speaking, utilitarianism either is that moon or it's the finger. The moon represents true morality, true good and evil. And the finger represents what points towards it. So what I'm saying is that either utilitarianism is true morality, or it's the best means for us to come as close as possible to understanding what true morality is. It gets us in the ballpark, which is pretty good. Better than where we were when we were conceived and born. The second problem of utilitarianism is that supposedly, sometimes obeying the utilitarian rule would cause us to do evil. For example, supposedly, it would cause us to murder an innocent child if doing so would make more creatures happier overall. 2, work like slaves the rest of our lives if doing so would make more creatures happier overall. And 3, let our beloved parent burn to death in a fire if we could save 2 other humans we never met before instead. These are serious and worthwhile criticisms. Yeah, I hope I didn't freak anybody out. The point is that some people who argue against utilitarianism say that, if you follow utilitarian logic, it would force you to do terrible things. Whatever is best for the majority is what you do, no matter what awful thing it takes to get there. And I'm going to say that that's not necessarily the case. Although at one level there seem to be exceptions to the utilitarian rule, these exceptions have the same basic goal as the utilitarian rule. That goal is to promote human happiness and the happiness of the creatures whom humans impact. In general, we humans are much happier when we don't murder an innocent child, work like a slave for the rest of our lives, and let our beloved parent burn to death. Thus, at the deepest level, it seems that the possible exceptions to the utilitarian rule ultimately and paradoxically promote the utilitarian rule, at least to an extent. I strongly doubt that acting like a psychopath or a slave is the way to achieve the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest amount of creatures, especially humans. However, if it is, just remember the finger pointing to the moon. Utilitarianism might not be the perfect ethical system, but it will still get us as close to the perfect ethical system as possible. Well, let's move on briefly and talk about ethical egoism. Ethical egoism asserts that whatever is best for oneself is good, and whatever is not is evil. So it basically says, look out for number one. If you're happy, all right, even if you make everybody else miserable. It is not the best ethical system because it is very unlikely to maximize the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest amount of creatures, especially humans. In fact, ethical egoism is very likely to do the opposite. That is, it is very likely to maximize the greatest amount of suffering for the greatest amount of creatures, especially humans. One reason this is true is that ethical egoists, and I mean this in the least mean and aggressive way possible, but they're like parasites. They feed off society. They take more from society than they give to it. If you know anything about parasites, I am talking a little metaphorically here, you know that they're not good for the organism that they live on. If a dog gets too many tapeworms, the dog's going to die. And likewise, if society has too many people taking from it rather than putting into it, that society is going to be less than healthy. In fact, it may end. Now, here someone might argue that ethical egoism encourages people to follow certain rules of conduct that help everyone to be happy. Smart ethical egoists realize that everyone's better off if certain people obey certain rules. You know, if everybody's stealing from society, society is going to collapse, so don't steal. At least that's what a smart ethical egoist would say. Well, that's all true, but I believe that even smart ethical egoists will break good rules if they believe that the consequence for doing them personally will be more positive than negative. If they think that, you know, overall it's going to increase their happiness, there's a very good chance they're going to do it. Let's consider doctors for a moment. A doctor who is a smart ethical egoist will probably say that the purpose of healthcare is primarily to help people be healthy. And that's true, and that's a good thing to say. However, he might be willing to lie to become richer if he personally believes that he'll get away with that lie. Maybe he requires patients to have unnecessary procedures that line his pocket. Or maybe he'll prescribe them more expensive drugs to receive kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies. Talk is cheap, and I believe that the questionable assertions of most ethical egoists should not be trusted. When it comes to ethical egoists, don't trust and do verify. Now, there's another ethical system called ethical altruism. It sounds like ethical egoism, but it's different, and it's basically the opposite. Ethical altruism asserts that whatever is best for everyone but oneself is good, and whatever is not is evil. Ethical altruism is not the best ethical system because it lacks many of the strengths of utilitarianism. It's not based on reason because there is no compelling rational argument why one should do whatever is best for everyone but oneself. There's no logical reason for that. And it does not treat all humans equally because it treats oneself as less important than all other humans. Which brings me back to utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is like the best compromise between ethical egoism and ethical altruism. Like ethical egoism, it says oneself is important. You are important. You should do what makes you happy. And like ethical altruism, it says everybody else is important too. You should work toward their happiness too. Kantian Ethics. Kantian Ethics asserts that one should always do one's duty regardless of the consequence of one's action. It asserts that following good rules is more important than having good outcomes. I have three objections to Kantian Ethics, but for the sake of time, I'll just mention this one. In reality, however, good outcomes are even more important than following good rules. If you don't believe me, just take the following one-question multiple-choice quiz. I'm going to give you a one-question multiple-choice quiz. Here's the question. Which of the following would you most want to be true? A, a friend purposely helped you and now you have $20 more. B, a friend accidentally hurt you and now you are a quadriplegic. C, an enemy purposely hurt you by stealing $20 from you. Or D, an enemy accidentally helped you by transferring $1 billion into your bank account. If you chose D, you prefer utilitarianism to Kantian ethics. I would rather have an enemy accidentally give me $1 billion than a friend to purposely give me $20. Intent is important, but consequences are more important when it comes to ethics. The last of the six is natural ethics. Natural ethics asserts that whatever nature tells us to do is good, and whatever action violates nature's command is evil. It is not the best ethical system because it often leads to less pleasure and more suffering. Now, we all love nature. It's beautiful. We're all part of it. It definitely should be respected and learned from, and in many cases emulated. However, if nature likes anything, it definitely likes suffering and death. And there are all kinds of examples in nature that would not be good for humans to follow to have a good human society. I'm thinking about penguins in Antarctica that steal rocks from each other to build their own nests. You may have seen that on these nature shows. They're busy building their nests, and this is a life or death thing. One penguin turns his back, another one grabs the rock from behind him and puts it on his own nest. How about male lions who murder the cubs of other male lions so that the female lions will go into heat? And what was the third one? Oh yeah, cuckoo birds. Cuckoo birds will actually, I don't know if they kill the eggs of the other people, of the other birds, but they definitely put their own eggs in the nest so that those birds will use their time and resources to raise the children of the cuckoo birds. Now, this basically is teaching, if we want to look at it from a purely natural point of view, that, yeah, sometimes it's good to murder, sometimes it's good to steal, sometimes it's good to lie. And I don't think that's the lesson we want to incorporate into our society. In conclusion, remember that utilitarianism is the best ethical system we humans have. It is either perfect or best points to the unknowable perfect ethical system. As much as you can, study it, embrace it, and promote it. If all humans voluntarily did these things, humanity would be as sane, good, and happy as possible for as long as humans exist. Also, the more sane, good, and happy humans are, the more likely they are to treat creatures well. The more utilitarianism, the more everyone wins. Thank you for your time and attention.